Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is directed by Joaquim Dos Santos, Kent Powers, and Justin K. Thompson, and stars the voices of Shamik Moore, Haley Steinfeld, and among others. And in this story, it deals with the continuing adventures of Miles Morales as he is pretty much living his life in New York as Spider-Man still, trying to basically save the day. And he ends up pretty much, not going to go into too much detail, but he ends up pretty much one day getting, as you've seen from the trailers, visited by Gwen Stacy, Spider-Gwen from the other film, and she ends up pretty much having to bring him across a journey to the Spider-Verse again, where she ends up having him introduced to Spider-Man 2099, also known as Miguel, voiced by Oscar Isaac. And pretty much it becomes a race against time, having to essentially stop this new villain that causes a threat, and it gets into some major territory that I can't get into spoilers with, but it results with the fate of the Spider-Verse in Miles' hands, and the rest of the Spider-Men that are all in the Spider-Verse. Now, here's a little backstory. Now, this was the sequel to the first Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie that came out in 2018. And growing up, I've been a longtime Spider-Man fan. If you follow my channel, I've been such a great fan of him since I was a kid, ever since I watched the original animated series. And then also growing up with the Tobey Maguire films that were directed by Sam Raimi, Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3 from the early 2000s. And you know, Spider-Man to me to this day always stands as my favorite Marvel hero of all time, and he's basically the same way I feel with Batman, and how, you know, he has that responsibility of being a hero of his own. And while I am more used to the Peter Parker equivalent, I am still familiar and have been getting more familiar with Miles Morales. And while I haven't really read much of him in the comics, seeing him in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and also from what I have played of Insomniac's 2018 game that features Miles Morales, you know, I've come to enjoy him in his own right along with Peter Parker, and I think that he holds his ground pretty well. And the first Into the Spider-Verse film was actually quite a surprise for me, as it really captured a lot of what you wanted to do with taking this character and trying to, you know, expand like this whole world with him having to face his own responsibilities and stuff, along the way with also encountering other different variants of Spider-Man throughout the different universes, through the multiverse and stuff, including the different incarnations of Peter Parker and everything. And so going into this movie, it was no surprise that I got myself interested, but I was still not going into overly hype with it, because even though I really did enjoy the first film, I didn't think it was like one of the greatest of all time. I just think that it was just one of the, I still thought it was one of the best Spider-Man films. I just didn't think, compared to the live action films, I kind of looked at it as its own kind of entity. But upon seeing this film, I can honestly say that everything that I enjoyed with the first Spider-Man movie, Into the Spider-Verse, was everything improved on in this one in every way possible, because I really love this movie a lot. And now I can consider that where this series is going and stuff, this movie so far is up there with one of the greatest Spider-Man films of all time for me. And so, to get my pros out of the way, I thought the voice and cast in this were phenomenal. Shamik Moore continues to be great as Miles Morales, with, you know, having that really innocence of him, and trying to really, you know, have that responsibility of having to deal with his family, and especially with his mom and dad, not realizing like who he is and stuff, and trying to prove on his own with, you know, having that responsibility to take and trying to do good for everything. Much like what we know with Spider-Man and Come to Love, especially with Peter Parker. And then also the way that it goes through this journey with him and Gwen Stacy also coming back is a really great. And I thought the chemistry was fantastic as well, especially with Haley Steinfeld coming back voicing the character. And I appreciate this one how they get to shine more with expand a lot of stuff that we didn't get to see much with Spider-Gwen from the first one, because we do get into some more backstory that fills in some gaps that I thought was really unique, with how we get to see where she comes from and her side of the view, as it goes into some more stuff that it covers that wasn't present in the first film. So I thought that was great. And then also, you know, some of the other cast returning members, like Jake Johnson coming back as Peter B. Parker, was great, you know. And not going to go into details, but they explore more of what happened to him out to the end of the first film that I thought was a nice touch. And it really fleshed his character out the way it plays out into this, that I think is going to play big in the next one. So he was great as usual, and also really funny too. And the other biggest standout for me the two other biggest standouts were actually Oscar Isaac as Spider-Man 2099, also known as Miguel, who is kind of like the most serious Spider-Man that we've seen, where he doesn't like to joke and stuff. And there is this great layers that they add to his character. I think that really pushes a lot of the stakes further of what we see with this universe that they're expanding on. I can't go into too detail because that's for major spoilers and stuff, but just the way that he was able to capture it, I thought Oscar Isaac really nailed it, and I can't wait to see more of him in the next movie. The same thing goes for the other Spider-Man they bring in, Spider-Punk, played by Daniel Kaluuya, who's like basically the punk rock version of Spider-Man. And I thought that he was funny at times, but I think that he was kind of more underused. Where, like I said, they're probably going to save more and more of his character for the next one. But he was still really good. And then the other one, surprisingly the most that I got a really kick out of that cracked me up at times was Jason Schwartzman's performance in this as the Spot, where he's just kind of like trying to be basically, instead of like your typical villain, he does come off as kind of quirky at first, but as he goes along, he's trying to make himself stand out where he's not just as he describes it, a villain of the week. And so he was great. And the other biggest pros I got to appreciate the most is the art style in this. Much like the first film, the way that they are able to blend in a lot of stuff that kind of has like this throwback to stop motion and traditional animated, and a mixture of all that with with the CGI and stuff. It really blends well with the worlds they go into in this. And there's also some really fascinating stuff that I couldn't believe they got away with doing all the different mixtures of animations in this. And not going to go into spoilers, but there's also some stuff in this that I couldn't believe that they actually were able to blend well with the Spider-Verse in this, that blew me away when seeing certain scenes. But I'll leave it there because that's a really huge thing that I got to give them credit for with some of the fan service they throw in there. But that was really fantastic, and that's just the way that it also really goes with how you can tell that each world that they go into is very dynamic in their own right. And as it also goes into more of the story with this, it pushes a lot more of the stakes this time, that I find myself really on the edge, and it gets into some pretty emotional territory that deals with the themes of family. And I'm not going to go into spoilers or anything like that, but when it really gets to its third act, it really hits hard. And it made me really like have my jaw drop to see what they were doing, because it ends on a big cliffhanger that I knew it was going to end on a cliffhanger, but on this level, I didn't really expect this to happen. And so this has got me even more hyped and more pumped for what they're going to establish with the next one. It's basically like how my interaction was when I got with Avengers Infinity War on that kind of cliffhanger kind of level. In a good way. The movie goes by at a such fast pace, especially when it gets to the second and third act. If I get into any kind of little minor con, I will say that the movie does kind of have a little bit of a slow pace at first, but as it went along and getting to where it was going to, I was able to overcome that, because it did feel like they had to have a lot of character development going on, with a lot of build-up with Miles and Gwen, where it was going with the story. There's some trimming that you could see that they could have maybe cut out just a little bit, maybe for pacing-wise, but I think that it was just maybe just like a couple minutes or so here and there, or maybe some time to kind of get it all, kind of get where we're going at first, because that is one of the only minor things that I would say, but it didn't hold the movie back from being great at all for me. And one of my other minor things is that the movie doesn't have as much like humor that I thought was there. There are times where the humor doesn't work quite as well like the first movie did, where I was actually laughing throughout. But, that didn't really hold the movie back for me. Anything. It's just that not every joke really landed to the point. Because I was still able to go along with the story with taking its more serious route when it was needed. And so with that being said, this is definitely going to be one of my favorite films of the year, and will also go down as one of my all-time favorite Spider-Man movies. With that, I'm going to give the movie a phenomenal grade on the Film Freaks meter. So for those of you who have also seen Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and also Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and also the other Spider-Man films, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.